So the past 3 years have been a really interesting time in the nonprofit industry. Like the corporate sector, there have been a lot of changes around ways of working or adapting new technologies, adapting new processes and priorities. But some of the things that are different for nonprofits is understanding that the impact of things like burnout among staff or among people is affecting not only the staff and volunteers who power our organizations, but also donors who provide funds to advance our missions, the folks who work on our boards of directors, and our partner organizations across the sector. So really understanding the impact that the past few years have had on the people who power our sector is critical when it comes to thinking about how we proceed next. Another key trend that's happened, not just because of the pandemic, but because of where we are societally with the generations that are coming up into the workforce and continuing to represent more of that workforce, is the idea that, 20 years ago, even working at a nonprofit, working for a purpose-driven organization, you really came into this sector looking for that sense of purpose, looking for a way to give back. But with the rise of B corporations and with other organizations on the corporate side that are really advancing their values, getting more invested in ESG, working in their communities in new ways, staff who may have flocked to the nonprofit sector before are really finding ways to live their values in some of these companies that are advancing their values as part of their everyday work for their customers. And so that is definitely something our sector is challenged by. The rates when it comes to folks who are leaving our sector for good are continuing to increase, and they are more than in other sectors. The number and rate of executive directors and CEOs and nonprofits who are reaching retirement age and who will be leaving the sector as well all come together to create some really important questions about how we continue to recruit excellent talent, retain amazing employees, and create organizations that do good in the world, but also do good for the people who power them. The leaders I speak to who seem to be having the most success with this are really committing to slowing down at their organization, to really getting focused on what their strengths are and what they do best, and to being very clear about what the organization will and won't pursue. While obviously, fair pay and good benefits are a very important part of retaining staff in a sector that has historically been underpaid, one of the things that leads most to burnout is mission creep and the idea that we keep moving on or collecting new programs, introducing new things, instead of allowing ourselves to really give ourselves permission to focus on what we do best. It's something I talk a lot about with leaders. And so as we move into these next couple of years, organizations that can gain true strategic clarity, knowing their identity as an organization and the role they play in the ecosystem or the geographic area they support, is going to be critical to keeping staff feeling motivated and that progress is being made on the mission and having them feel valued in their work and the contributions they're making. I'm really excited right now about the trends we're seeing in individualization when it comes to employee management. We've all known for years that great management means understanding the staff member you're trying to grow and working with their strengths, helping them build the right skills they need to keep moving forward in their career or at your organization. I'm excited by the leaders who are out there really thinking about how they can provide management experiences to help their team bring their strengths forward in new ways. Of course, we need some centralized processes and some streamlined and collective ways of working. But often the leaders that are successful in keeping their team members on board and moving their organization objectives forward have spent the time to understand how their staff like to be recognized, what methods of communication work best in which situations, how to keep reinforcing the priorities of the organization and say no when there's just not bandwidth or that's not the priority. So I've really been heartened to see more leaders understand that by providing that individualized experience, by getting to know their teams better, they can really harness those strengths to advance their mission, advance their fundraising efforts, and to have the kind of impact they want to have in their communities. So we obviously have many more young people entering the workforce, and what they're familiar with from a technology perspective, from an expectations perspective, from what it looks like to be a committed hard worker in today's environment, may look a lot different from what our older generations are used to. And while everyone's an individual, and I don't want to have a big, broad brush stroke across generations, it is important for leaders to be thinking about how they will integrate these younger team members, especially if they're working in a remote environment, into the work of the organization. Many of us who have been at this work for a long time can remember sitting outside our boss's office, getting pulled into meetings, getting those ad hoc professional development opportunities just based on proximity. In a remote work environment and with staff who are very comfortable with different kinds of technology that is now available, we have to rethink our approach to formal professional development and for intentional opportunities to help those sort of newer or younger generations contribute their strengths, but also ensure they're building the skills needed to become well-rounded leaders in our impact organizations. While strategic planning remains a very big part of the work in the nonprofit world, and we've been doing it in similar ways for 40 plus years in our sector, more and more nonprofit executives are seeing that before we get to that planning process, we need more clarity about who we are as an organization, what roles we play in our ecosystem or the issue area that we work on, and what that means as far as the work we do and don't do to advance our mission. This can come through in many ways, but I'm really seeing more executives spend time on clarifying their own vision, their own way of articulating that identity, so that then they're able to carry that through to great strategic planning processes, great marketing planning, great fundraising planning, so that there's enough clarity for both that leader and the staff who power the organization to speak with one voice, to be connected and understand who we are, so that we're not spreading ourselves too thin, trying to be everything to everyone, and confusing, frankly, our supporters and our community that we serve. Sometimes in our effort to want to help, we say yes, or we can do that, to things that are well beyond our strengths and our scope. So knowing what we do best and being able to codify that is a huge part, I think, of where we're going next as a sector, and will lead to, I think, strategic plans that are shorter and more focused, both in timeline and the work they promise. Organizations really honing in on the couple of things that they're best at instead of trying to address everything. And hopefully more partnerships and potentially mergers across the sector as organizations understand how to best bring their strengths to the forefront so that they can create genuine connections both with their staff, with their volunteers, with the community they serve, and the broader community that their work supports. I would say probably in the decade prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of emphasis on just acquiring a new tool because we didn't like the old one or it wasn't meeting our needs. And now I think as organizations are recognizing that the technology landscape is very broad with so many different options available, that they really need to consider what it is that they need technology to do for them, where it can help with respect to collaboration or advancing impact or advancing automation, and how to make the most of the systems they already have. Or when they're introducing new systems, bring in the right kind of training and support to help the humans who need to use the technology do that as effectively as possible. Making sure that our staff really were investing in that training and the effort around learning to use the tool to its full effect. So that we're not making an investment in something that goes underutilized or sits on a virtual shelf somewhere. Leaders are really needing to think through both how they're going to diversify revenue streams in a way that is strategic and makes sense. So not trying to do everything all at once, but really focusing on one or two key investment areas. I really encourage organizations. There's some great folks in our sector who talk about ensuring that they're thinking about this as a financing plan, not a fundraising plan. When we think about things in long-term financing sense and that lens, it enables us to think beyond just the operating budget of this year. And so there might be board policies that need to be changed to allow for multi-year fiscal views, or multi-year budget alignment to a particular strategic priority or plan. There may also be, fundraising streams that are not performing as well as they used to, that need some critical evaluation. And there may be others that have been strong and steady, but maybe we haven't invested much more in them. And there's an opportunity to move that forward as well. So for every organization, it's going to look a little different. But the main, point here is that there isn't some kind of magical one revenue stream or one tactic out there that's going to do it for you. It's really about developing relationships with donors and supporters across the spectrum of giving and giving them natural ways to connect with your cause and to invest in it, making sure you're helping them understand what that investment does for their community, for the folks you're serving or the issue area you're addressing.